You open a private parking charge letter and your first instinct might be, should I just pay this before it gets worse? But before you pay it or before you ignore it, there are a few things worth checking. What type of notice is it? What's the deadline? What evidence do they show? What does the sign actually say? What's the appeal route? And have extra debt recovery fees been added? Because a private parking charge is not something to panic pay, but it's also not something to blindly ignore. This is before you sign UK. We check the small print in claims, contracts, scams and money decisions before ordinary people commit. And today we're checking private parking charge letters, not council tickets, not police penalties, private parking charge notices. First, check what type of letter you have. This matters. A private parking charge notice is usually issued by a landowner or parking company on private land. Think supermarket car parks, retail parks, private residential car parks, gym car parks, hospital or business car parks depending on who manages the land. That's different from a council penalty charge notice, and it's different from a police fixed penalty notice. The name sounds similar, the letters can look serious, and some people call all of them parking fines, but they're not the same thing. So before you do anything else, look at the notice and ask, who issued this? Is it a private parking company, a council, or the police? Because the appeal route, deadlines and consequences can be different. This video is about private parking charge notices. Second, do not panic pay if you think you might appeal the decision. This is one of the biggest traps. Paying can feel like the quickest way to make the stress disappear. But citizens' advice say if you pay a parking ticket that you're appealing, it's usually seen as admitting the ticket was right. That means you usually cannot appeal after you have paid. So if you think there's a genuine issue with the charge, pause before paying. That doesn't mean never pay, and it doesn't mean ignore it. It just means check first, because the decision point's important. If the charge is correct, paying early may sometimes reduce the amount. But if the charge is wrong, unfair, unclear, or missing important details, paying too quickly could remove options you wanted to use. The point is not to fight every charge. The point is to understand what you're accepting before you pay. Third, check the deadline. Private parking letters are built around deadlines. There might be a lower amount if you pay quickly. There might be an appeal deadline. There might be a point where the charge increases. And there might be a point where the case gets passed to debt recovery. Gov.uk says many private parking operators add debt recovery fees if a charge is not paid or appealed within 28 days. The industry code refers to debt recovery fees of up to £70, so the date on the letter matters, but the deadline should not make you act without reading. Write down 3 dates: the date of the parking event, the date the notice was issued, and the date you must pay or appeal by. If something arrived very late or if the timeline looks wrong, that's a reason to investigate properly. Do not guess, do not rely on memory, check the dates. Fourth, check the evidence. What are they saying happened? Did you overstay? Did you enter the wrong registration? Did payment fail? Did the machine not work? Did the app glitch? Was the car recorded entering and leaving by ANPR cameras? Was there a windscreen ticket? Was someone else driving? You're not trying to write a court argument, you're just trying to understand the claim. Look for the basics: your vehicle registration, the location, the date, the entry and exit time, the reason for the charge, any photos, and the amount being requested. Then compare it with what you remember. Did you actually park for that whole period? Or does the camera only show entry and exit? Did you leave and return? Did you pay but enter 1 digit wrong? Did the signage explain the rule clearly? Could you actually see the signs? This is where evidence matters. Take screenshots, keep receipts, keep payment confirmations, keep app records, and take photos of signs if you can return safely. Also keep copies of every letter, because if you decide to appeal, vague memory is weaker than evidence. Fifth, check the signs. With private parking, the sign is important because it usually sets the terms. What does it say you agreed to by parking? How long could you stay? Was payment required? Was there a registration requirement? Was there a permit rule? Was there a maximum stay? Were cameras being used? Were the terms readable from where you were parked? Citizens' advice say private parking rules should be made clear on nearby signs. So if the signs were missing, hidden, faded, confusing or hard to read, that may matter. Again, this does not mean every unclear sign automatically cancels the charge, but it does mean you should check, because the letter tells you what they claim, the sign tells you what the parking terms were supposed to be, and those are not always the same thing. Sixth, check whether a grace period could apply. This is especially relevant if you are only just out of time. Citizens' advice say it may be worth appealing if you are only 5 or 10 minutes late. That is because grace period rules may apply. A grace period is basically a short amount of time around parking. For example, time to read the signs, or time to decide whether to stay, or time to leave after paid parking runs out. Do not assume this automatically fixes everything, but if the letter is based on a tiny overstay, it's something to check. Look at the parking company's trade association rules. Look at the signs, look at the times on the notice, and if you appeal, explain clearly what happened. I was only a few minutes late is weaker than. The notice says entry was 10:02 and exit was 11:07. The signs allowed 1 hour, and I believe the extra time was within the grace or exit period. Specific beats emotional. Seventh, check the appeal route. The notice should tell you how to appeal. It may tell you to appeal through the parking company's website. It may give you a reference number, and it may mention independent appeals route if the first appeal is rejected. Read that part carefully. Do not just send angry emails. Do not send original documents, and don't write long emotional story with no evidence. Keep it simple. What happened? Why do you think the charge is wrong or unfair? What evidence supports that? What outcome are you asking for? For example, the payment machine was not working, the signs were unclear, the registration was entered with a small typo, the driver was within a reasonable grace period, the notice arrived late, the vehicle was not parked illegally. The point is not to copy a random internet template and hope. The point is to match your appeal to the actual reason. Eighth, check whether extra fees have been added. This is where many people panic. A letter might start as one amount, then later a debt recovery letter may show a higher amount. Gov.uk says many private parking operators add further debt collection fees if the charge is not paid or appealed within 28 days. The industry code refers to up to £70 being added as a debt recovery fee. That does not mean every added fee is automatically valid, and it doesn't mean that you should ignore the letter. It means you should check what has been added, when it was added, and why. Look for the original charge, the added fee, and the total now being demanded, the date it changed, and whether the original signs or notice said extra fees may apply. If the amount has jumped, do not just react to the bigger number. Break it down. Original charge, added fee, deadline, appeal status, next step. That gives you control. Now, let's be clear about ignoring letters. Some old advice online says to ignore private parking charges. That's risky. Private parking charges are not the same as council tickets, but that does not mean they are meaningless. Gov.uk says if a parking charge goes unpaid, parking operators can ultimately take a motorist to court. That does not mean every letter becomes a court case, and that does not mean you should panic about a CCJ the moment a letter arrives. But ignoring everything blindly can remove options and make the situation harder to understand. So the safer rule is, do not panic pay, do not blindly ignore, check properly and then decide. Pay, appeal, get advice or investigate further. Here's the simplest checklist. Before you pay a private parking charge, check these 7 things. 1. Is it definitely a private parking charge notice, not a council penalty charge notice, not a police fixed penalty notice? 2. Who issued it? A private parking company, a landowner, a debt collector? 3. What was the deadline to pay or appeal? 4. What evidence do they show? Photos, times, location, reason? 5. What do the signs actually say? Were they clear, readable and visible? 6. Is there a possible appeal reason? Wrong details, unclear signs, machine problem, payment issue, tiny overstay, grace period, you were not driving. 7. Have extra debt recovery fees been added? And if they have, what exactly has changed? This video is not telling you whether to pay or appeal a specific charge. That depends on the facts. But it is telling you not to let the letter make the decision for you, because the scary part is often the pressure, a deadline, a bigger number, a formal looking letter, a phrase like debt recovery. But the practical response is boring, and boring is good. Identify the notice, check the deadline, check the evidence, check the signs, check the appeal route, and check the added fees. Then decide your next step. Before you pay it or ignore it, check what you're actually dealing with. This is before you sign UK. We check the small print in claims, contracts, scams and money decisions before ordinary people commit.